John Jermyn, Fire Department, New York, 9/11. John served as a firefighter in the city of New York from 1983, October 83 to December of 2002, almost 20 years as a firefighter. John's one of the 22 survivors that I interviewed in Elizabeth, New Jersey and Brooklyn, New York in 2011 for my feature film 9/11 Remembered, A Day of Infamy. John's also featured in that film. I'm bringing his story to you today on Voices of History channel because these men and women, folks, they were in a war. The war, I call it the War of 9/11, the Battle of 9/11. Many of them have died since 9/11 because of what they were exposed to that day. And John was one of the firemen that I interviewed in 2011. It was August of 2011. And what a great story he tells, folks. Again, in my mind, these are veterans of a war, of a battle. And we did lose John December 24th, Christmas Eve of 2019. I've lost several of my 9/11 survivors. And it's a war they're fighting, folks, just like Agent Orange affected so many Vietnam veterans. The effects of what they breathed, what they were around during the cleanup, during the actual incident, has taken the lives of many of them. So kind of with a heavy heart today, I share this, but I'm happy that I can share his story with you on my Voices of History channel. I want you to help me honor this man who served his country as a fireman and who gave me a tremendous interview, folks. He had the first 911 call to the dispatchers when that first plane hit the first tower, the North Tower, that morning about 8:46 a.m. John called in from a cell phone, was off duty that day. He called in and the dispatcher didn't even know what he was talking about, so that's how early that call was. But you're going to hear that in this video. And just a chilling 60 seconds that he called and told what he saw and what was happening, and told the dispatcher to call everybody. They got a major fire in the World Trade Center. Folks, it's like yesterday, almost 23 years ago, and I'm happy to share his story with you today. And I just say God bless him and all the firemen I interviewed. I interviewed Port Authority, police, EMS, paramedics, people in the towers, civilians in and around the towers that day, that morning. And I wrote about it in a song, Keep Them Separated, Keep Them Safe. So, okay, let's get into the story now. I'm just grateful that I can share this with you today. And I would ask you to share it with a family member, a friend, a loved one, a fireman, somebody. Thank them, just like we thank our veterans. These are veterans of war, folks. And I'm happy to share his story with you today. And I thank you for watching and listening and sharing these videos. And I say God bless you. Enjoy John's story.
I remember that day like anyone. I heard the news on my radio. My mother called and said your brother's son is somewhere in the city and we just don't know. So I drove like hell back to Jersey to pick up my dad and strike out to find my brother who we still had not heard from. Then we headed up Highway 109. Well, we got as far as Hoboken and we saw that skyline smoking. Then a call came through on my mobile phone. I said, hey brother, we're coming to take you home. So I put a flag atop my car and I put spare change in collection jars. And I watch the news with a poison hate, and for justice to this day I wait. So I'll just say thanks to all of you go down to ground zero. That's the ghost of any hero. If you go down to ground zero, that's the ghost of any hero. If you go down to ground zero.
Thinking about talking to everybody this week, I thought of a good first question. The first question is just the night before 9/11. I don't know, maybe you've thought about it, maybe you haven't, but I'm interested in my work. Just what do you remember about the night before? I almost said going into battle, which you did, but what do you remember most about? Do you remember anything about the night before?
Well, interestingly enough, I do recall a little bit about the 10th of September in 2001, and it had a big impact on me because I became, through my work with the Fire Safety Education Program, I became a substitute teacher. I am a college graduate, not an education major, but with a degree, I went to, and with the product from my captain, I went down to the Board of Education and was certified as a substitute, and on September 10th, 2001, it was a proud moment for me. I returned to Tottenville High School, where I was a student, as a substitute teacher. And my thought was, with around about 20 years on the job, now this presented an opportunity for me. I thought that maybe someday I could retire now, that maybe I had another skill that I could use, something that I like to do, and I thought it was a good thing for me. I was very pleased with myself, and things in my life were going very well at that time. And that's what occurred for me the day before 9/11.
The morning of September 11th, it was a Tuesday morning. I hear the weather was beautiful. Tell me about waking up that morning, going to work, and then kind of walk me into that day and slowly walk me into that day.
Yeah, now as I said, I was in a real good period of my life. I had another career lined up, something to fall back on, and I had many opportunities with my work in the fire department and fire safety education, and I was waking up every day. I had a nice routine in my life. I was waking up every morning at 6 a.m., no alarm clock, feeling good and ready to go. I looked forward to each day and going to work and doing a good job because every day was different. And this day was a beautiful day, and I was living on Staten Island and working up in Manhattan at the Fire Museum on Spring Street. And I remember taking the boat, the Staten Island Ferry, into Manhattan. I was on the 8 o'clock boat, and it was a beautiful day. The sun was out, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, it was dry, sunny, crystal clear, perfect late summer day. And my thought was, how much better could it get than this? And the boat tied up in Manhattan at 8:30, and I got on the subway to go uptown, a couple of short stops, and when I exited the subway at Houston Street at 8:45, things took a very big change.
Yeah, dispatcher. Yes? This is off-duty firefighter Jermyn. I guess you got this already. But you got a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. You aware of that? You have a plane that crashed into the World Trade Center in Manhattan? World Trade Center in Manhattan. Well, where are you going from? I'm on Barrett Street in Manhattan. Barrett Street in Manhattan. It's the North Tower, World Trade Center. North Tower? North Tower. You got... And the phone number you're calling from? I'm on a cell phone. I'm an off-duty firefighter. My name's Jermyn. Okay. It's the North Tower, Vichy Street. You got Vichy Street side. Okay, thanks a lot. Send them all because you got major fire on the upper floors of the World Trade Center.
I emerged from the subway at Houston Street in Varick, which is 1 mile north of the Trade Center, I heard a woman say, "Look at the fire." So, being in the business, I instinctively looked up. I did not see the impact of the plane, but I witnessed the result of it probably moments after impact. I had a perfect view from 1 mile north of, looking directly down at the North Tower, which the plane impacted the north face of the North Tower and the upper floors. So I witnessed a fireball hundreds of feet in the air. I witnessed the structure of the building punctured, probably 15 floors high from up to down, and a huge fire coming out of it. I knew exactly what it was. Even though I didn't see the plane, you would think, oh, it was an accident, it was a small plane. I knew exactly what it was. I had been there for the previous attack in 1993. I was on duty and responded that day. And my greatest fear was, what if they ever took these towers down?
The 9/11 transmission that I just heard, 911 transmission, that was, you were off duty.
Well, I was on my way to work. I had an administrative job at the Fire Museum, but technically I was off duty, even though friends of mine told me later, no, you were on duty. I was on the job. As soon as I went into emergency mode, immediately upon seeing what happened, and instinctively, I called the dispatcher directly, and I was giving him a report of what I saw, and evidently, since I called direct, that was one of the first calls the department received. The dispatcher wasn't even aware of what I was talking about, so I repeated myself. And as I was giving that call, I could hear in the background the noise of the police horses, the horses from the mounted unit, which were located nearby, were responding. I could hear the clip-clop of the horses, I could hear ambulances, and I heard from around the corner from my location, engine 24, ladder 5, I could hear them turning out onto quarters, out of quarters to respond. So I knew what we were up against right from the get-go.
So after that moment, what did you do? And did you by chance see the second plane come in? So tell me the next few minutes what happened.
Well, what happened with me was initially my initial thought was to go down there immediately, but then I overruled that. I said, I'm one guy by myself. It's not the right thing to do. So I reported to the Fire Museum, which was my work location. I got into my uniform. I had my fire gear there, and I also had access to a vehicle that was there at the museum. So I had a plan in my head what I was going to do, and I put it into effect. I did, I had 20 years in the job, and it did pay off. I did learn over the time. We have procedures. We follow procedures. I took a journal entry. I notified my company. I notified headquarters. Some of them were aware of what was happening. Some of them were not. I also had the TV on, and I could see on television what was occurring as it was happening. So I was receiving information, and at that point, one of the director from the museum called up, and he asked me to wait. He says he knew I was going down there, but he wanted me to wait until somebody else arrived in the building. So I was very reluctant to do that, but I did, and as a result of that, I think it contributed to, I ran into my old company from Brooklyn, and you will speak to those gentlemen shortly, and it worked out for me. But what I did following that is I got my gear, I got in a van that I had at the building and started to head downtown. The street was pretty open. En route, I did pick up a couple other firefighters outside of Ladder Company 8, which was on the way down, and upon hitting Vesey Street, which is the northern border of the Trade Center, I drove right up to it. I drove right up to the North Tower, and I made a turn, and the guys wanted to jump out. There was 2 or 3 fellas that were with me, and they were kind of young-looking guys, and I urged them, I told them I wouldn't stop, I wouldn't let them out until they told me that they would go and report to, either find their company or somebody in their battalion and report to a supervisor. I told them, don't go in there on your own, find a boss, find a company. They agreed, so I let them out. At that point, I drove the van to West Street, and knowing what I knew from 1993, it was a scene where there was apparatus all over the place. My thought was to get this vehicle now away from the building. So I drove north. I turned north on West Street and started to drive away from the scene. And when I got several blocks away, maybe up to almost Chambers Street, I thought that was a good place now to drop this vehicle off. So I put it on the side of the road, and I got out, and as I was putting my turnout gear on, here comes 220 engine coming south on West Street. The chauffeur was a fellow I worked with for many years, George Marsh. George saw me. They saw me before I saw them, I think, and then I heard Owen Carlock's voice telling me to come with them. And that was my calling. I heard it, and I knew that's where I belong, with them. They called me. I spoke to the captain, Steve Graber, who told me, John, you can come with us. I'm going to put you on the riding list, but you have to stay with us. And I agreed to that. And I went with those gentlemen, and the company filled out the roster, and we proceeded to do our job.
So at that time, what time is it? Is it after 9 o'clock, you think, at that time?
Well, interestingly enough, as I got on the rig with 220, Owen and the guys started to fill me in that there was a second impact. I wasn't even aware of the impact of the South Tower. In the time from I left to the museum to the time that I arrived at the scene, there was another impact, which I was not aware of. So now the incident became twice as large. It was already enormous. I knew when I saw the impact, I knew there was going to be many, many deaths. I knew there was going to be many civilian deaths. I knew a lot of firefighters were going to die. I knew that when I saw it. What I didn't know, I thought we were going to go up there and put the fire out. I really didn't think the building was going to come down.
So yesterday I talked to 4 people that were in the towers when they were hit. One was on the 92nd floor, one was on the 36th floor, 2 were on the 13th floor. And the contrast here, they're coming down and you guys started coming up. And one lady remarked she saw a terrified look on a captain's face and knew they were in trouble. He had an axe going upstairs, and she for some reason that made a big impression on her. She thought, oh my gosh, this is bad, you know, and just by the look on his face, and then needing to get out. But so here I'm thinking that they're coming down, you're going up, and it's like you're going to put the fire out. Is that the tactical plan, or is it a rescue operation there going on, or just what's it called in fire terminology? What do you guys? You're attacking. Steve probably could tell me.
Well, in New York, we have an aggressive interior attack. We always go in the building, vent the building. Everybody has a job to do. Looks like chaos, but there is a plan. And most of the time, we're successful when we put the fire out. And I had no reason to believe that that was not going to occur that day. Although, with the, as we know the results, but with the fire load and the stress and with the impact of the planes putting the sprinkler systems out, it was overwhelming. And actually, that had been written about. A volume, when the building was built years ago, one of the chiefs correctly wrote that if there was more than 2 or 3 floors of fire, that they would lose the building. So they actually had information that he was correct.
So tell me, what are you doing now at this point? Are you going, did you actually end up going upstairs? What happened?
Well, we were, I believe our orders were, we reported to the command post of the South Tower, because it was two incidents, the North Tower and the South Tower. Neither building had collapsed at that point. I believe our orders were to enter the South Tower and to go up and effect and assist in rescue operations and fire suppression. En route to that, I saw many horrible things. There was jumpers coming around us. The ground was littered with body parts. It was pretty horrible. I was traumatized. But I was able to shut a lot of that out. I didn't give it any attention. I knew what it was, but I stayed focused that we had a job to do. The captain took me in. I told him I was going to stay with him, and I stayed focused on him. I watched the captain, and I followed him. And that's what we do. And that's what I did. We were en route, we were on Liberty Street, somewhere in proximity to the plaza of the South Tower, en route to entering the South Tower, when the building started to collapse.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the World Trade Center 1 was hit first. Was that the South Tower? 1 is the South Tower?
Well, it's the North Tower and the South Tower. North Tower was hit first. South Tower was the second impact.
But the second impact building fell first, is that correct? Or is that not?
Correct.
Okay.
The building that was hit second collapsed first. So it went faster than the North Tower.
And you're just on scene, entering or trying to enter the building right when that started to come down?
Well, with my recollection, we were en route to the building, and you could hear the sound of the upper floors, what we call pancaking, hitting each other. And it was very methodical. It was the pause in between the floors. I didn't look up. I knew what it was. I knew what was occurring. And in my mind, I was quite certain. I sized it up. And at that moment, I believed that that was the end for me. I knew how big the building was, and I knew that even in my best day, I wasn't that fast a runner, and with all the gear on, I wasn't going to outrun the collapse of the building. I knew that, although I did turn around and started to head towards the river, away from the building, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw Captain Graber heading in the other direction. And my thought was, this man took me in, I told him I was going to stay with him, and now I'm going the other way. I said, and I reversed myself, which I don't like to do. But I did, because we do follow orders. And I followed him, and we wound up somewhere in relation to I guess it was the Deutsche Bank building. And we were still outside, but we were actually underneath the overhang of the building. As it turned out later, I think it might have been the loading dock of the building, but we found shelter, and as the building was coming down, my assumption was that the tower would collapse onto Deutsche Bank building, and the Deutsche Bank building would collapse, which part of it did. It did impact Deutsche Bank, but the building did not come down. And the strange sensation that I had, there was no anticipation of me other than that I was sure I was going to die. And I wasn't hit by any heavy steel. Things were coming down, but I didn't get hit by anything that really hurt me. But what I did notice, I was expecting a big blast of energy. When I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking this building, 110-story building is collapsing in front of us. I said, I'm probably going to get blown to bits by the impact of it coming out. And it didn't happen. If anything, I felt this was the feeling to me, I felt a negative sensation. I felt all energy being drawn away from me. We were in some kind of void or in an area where the air was being sucked back in. And again, I thought there wasn't much sensation around you. I had a Scott mask on. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't hear anything. The only process that I had was the thoughts in my head. And I kind of thought that maybe this is it. Maybe I died. Because the energy was drawn away from me. I never felt anything like this before. And it felt like the life was being sucked out of me. And that's how I felt. And I don't know how long it was. It wasn't that long, but for a short period, I was alone because we all got separated. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling. And then shortly after that, I heard a familiar voice. I heard somebody calling for an axe for a set of irons. And it was the captain calling Owen. And I know Owen had the irons. And I heard Owen respond. And I said, now I know I'm not alone now. I hear these guys. And I went over and reunited with them. So now I was with two of my guys. Shortly after that, and I knew what he was talking about. He was trying to enter the building. We were looking to enter the building. We were going to take a window and get inside. Even though we were outside, usually you're inside trying to get out. In this case, we were outside trying to get in. But this was uncharted waters for us. Nobody ever faced this before at this magnitude. And at that point, I saw a light coming, a door open. There was a door to the loading dock opened up. The lights in the building were on, and they were in the loading dock, in the lobby, in the service lobby. And the next thing you know, the company reassembled in that lobby. The custodians were in there. They handed us bottles of water. A couple other guys were in there, and we formed a group, and we got together at that point. And we knew what happened. We knew what happened, but the company was intact still. Everybody took a pretty good beating, but we were still on our feet. And at that time, there was some discussion as to what the next action was going to be. One of the members was still an active Marine Reserve, and his initial response was to go in and make a search. We should go conduct a search for survivors. Pretty much everybody sounded like a reasonable thing. The captain was there. Captain took a bad beat in his eyes. He was pretty much blinded. He had a lot of debris in his eyes. And I remember he was having a tough time seeing. And we were all in stages of shock. And then Owen Carlock then suggested that if the South Tower came down, that the North Tower was going to collapse also. It was a very wise thought. Again, it went around the company, and we had a couple of senior members. It was across the board. We had a captain, we had senior men, some guys with 20 years on the job, and a couple of junior men. We all decided we were going to go into a retreat. If the North Tower was coming down, we were in a bad position, and that we should evacuate the area. I had a pretty good sense of where we were. I'd spent a lot of time, I worked in the area, I spent a lot of time there. I knew my way around, and I have a pretty good sense of direction, so at that time I chimed in. I said, we should go this way. We should go south and west, below the tower and towards the river. And that's what we started to do as a group, as a company. We remained intact, and I commend everybody for still to continue to operate as a firefighting unit. Under severe conditions, we were still had a job to do, and we were attempting to do it. So we got about, I would say, 2 blocks south and 2 blocks west. I think we were in 75 West Street when the North Tower collapsed. And we knew what it was. We knew what happened. I was in shock. I was in total shock. It was my worst fear happened. It happened, and I was shocked.
Wow, so I'm gonna go back and come back, but initially, when you made that call to dispatch, I guess you called dispatch, you're off duty, you call,
Right.
let me hear. Just quickly again, you said some woman said, look, or something, that's the first time you had any indication?
Yeah, I came out of the subway, and as soon as I hit the top step, I heard somebody say, "Look at the fire," and I looked up, and I could see it. I saw everything from the North Tower, and so I knew what it was. I knew what we were up against.
Is that one of those things I'm not gonna say you think about all your life. I mean, you think about the big game, the big moment as a fireman.
Sure.
You think about the big fire. Secondly, can you really be prepared for what happened that day?
Well, in the firehouse, one of the jokes is, "See you at the big one," because you don't want to come into work the next day and hear about the fire that happened. If there is you don't want to see people lose their home. But when there is, the job is putting the fire out. You want to be there. You want to do your job, and it's very rewarding when you do. In this case, we did what we always do. We turn out. We show up. Guys came on duty, off duty, from home, from vacation. Guys came from the golf course. They dropped whatever they're doing, and they came in, because that's what firefighters do. So a very dedicated bunch of people. And when people need help, firefighters respond.
Did you think a plane had hit the tower when you looked up? I mean, did you go plane, tower, you just knew?
Yeah, and I could see from the volume of fire, I knew it was jet fuel, and from the impact of the building. I could see the building impacted, and you could almost make out, and it went in on a tilt, and you could see from wing to wing where it made a hole in the building. So it was apparent to me. Somebody said it was an airliner, but it was apparent to me that it was not a small plane and it was not an accident. I knew it was an intentional act. I knew it was an act of terrorism when I was there in '93, and although I was surprised, it was not expected, and the results that occurred, I really did not expect either.
Two questions, and forgive my ignorance here, but the people who planned this, do you think their whole plan was to hit the tower and for it to fall? Secondly, did you think, or command think, that, hey, this thing might collapse initially, or was you know what I'm saying? Did they intentionally do that with the idea of it collapsing?
Well, I believe that in 1993, that was their goal, was to topple the towers over. When they planted the bomb in the basement of the garage, their intent was to topple the towers over. So in this case, when you put a major airplane into the building with that amount of fuel, they knew it was going to create tremendous amount of damage. If they could foresee that it was going to collapse, I don't know. And as far as the higher ups and knowing, well, I can't comment on what they thought. I don't know. It did not enter my mind. I did not think that was not one of the things I was thinking as we entered the building.
It's just a layman's thought question, I mean, that I had personally. It's just, I'm just thinking, it's just incredible, overwhelming. There had to be a sense of calm with the command staff, or else, you can't. There was enough chaos going on, so I'm assuming that the chiefs, they set up command, and you guys did your job.
Well, in the fire service, we deal with chaos all the time. And what I saw that day was no different than any other day. I saw men doing their job, no panic, no calm. No, I was shocked after the collapse, but up to that point, it was business as usual. It is a little overwhelming when you're going into a 110-story building. It wasn't. I worked in Brooklyn. Most of the buildings I went into were 3 or 4 stories high. I was real confident with my ability there. This was something different. A high-rise building is a whole different game plan.
Again, I'm just beginning now to talk to some of the people like yourself that were first responders. So when I ask these questions, understand why I'm asking them. But how high, and just maybe to answer a personal question, how high do you think the firemen got that day? I mean, how many stories? And with all that gear, and I know you go through training when you first start, you probably go up and down stairs with all your gear. But even the best physically fit person, I mean, how fast and how high can a person go in a situation like that?
Well, I have to tell you, firefighters are some tremendous athletes. They're in great shape, and many of them pride themselves. It is a young man's job, but experience does a lot for you too. I've seen guys in my career, some old salty guys, and they just make it look easy. And it was a pleasure to be around them. And I learned from the best. I learned from the guys who worked in the war years. And at that time, I thought I was in pretty good shape. I wasn't going up the stairs, but the information that I got was that some of the first responding companies, which would have went into the North Tower, and one of those, 10 truck was the first, they were across the street on Liberty Street, and a fella that we worked with, Steve Harrell, was the lieutenant there that night. And my information, from what I've heard, the battalion, those companies reached the upper floors of the North Tower. They were up there in the 80s, and they had radio transmissions from them. I think it was Chief Palmer was up there, and it was identified. They did their job. They got up to they were in position, and they did their job.
Was it to direct people out? I mean, is that kind of what you do? Is you direct people out to the stairwell, and I mean, you go into the building and try to help people get out? Is that
Well, in that situation, certainly to help aid in the evacuation of anybody trapped. In this case, most people were trying to get out, but some people remained at their stations. From what I heard, there was, again, information is very important, and there was many different situations, but certainly the fire department was successful in the evacuation. The numbers that I have read, that they feel that there was a total of 25,000 people between the two towers that were evacuated from the area that day. Now, did the fire department assist in that? Without a doubt. They got people out of the building, without a doubt.
overwhelming?
Absolutely, it's overwhelming.
So the towers collapse, you're in the area, I saw one videotape, it's like an atomic bomb, I've never been in that, but everything was ash white, looked like a snowstorm.
Yes.
Quiet after the collapse, this is what I'm relaying from a video. I mean, was it kind of like that where you were at, or were sounds, people trapped? Did you help anybody at that point? What was going on?
Well, it was not what you would think it would be. It seemed to me that there was not a tremendous amount of people who were injured and in need of help. At least not, it wasn't apparent. It seemed to me that either you survived or you did not. You were either gone or you were still there. What I witnessed, I saw horrible things before the collapse. After the collapse, not so much.
Tell me, okay, maybe for the end, I just need to, tell me the engine company or ladder company you're with and your title at the time. You're
Well, I was a firefighter.
So I'm going to put firefighter or fireman?
Firefighter.
Okay, and tell me the company.
And I was assigned to ladder 77, which is in Staten Island, but I was working at the Fire Museum on an administrative detail. But prior to my assignment in 77 truck, I was a member of ladder company 122 in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and engine 220 is in the same quarters. So 220 was the engine that picked me up, and I knew most of those gentlemen from my years spent over in that company in Brooklyn.
So what can I put on the screen when I have your name up there? What you want me to put? Ladder 77, engine 220? What do you want me to put?
I was ladder 77.
Firefighter, gotcha.
Firefighter.
Okay, John, if I can ask, did you lose men in your company? I mean, I hear the fire station across the street, number 10, is that the one that lost most people?
Well, many companies suffered many losses. Some lost all members of the engine and the truck and the battalion. Many companies suffered very, very heavily. Fortunately for our company that day, we all survived, along with the members of Ladder Company 122, who actually, to my knowledge, I think they entered the building, the South Tower. They were in front of us, and they all survived. But we did lose, we all lost many, many friends, but 122 and 220 had several firefighters who either got promoted or transferred, guys that we worked with for a number of years. Joe Muscali, Rescue 5. Dave Fontana was Squad 1. Steve Harrell got promoted. He was in 10 truck. And at a 220, Keith Roy, Maynard, was on the rotation, and he was with, I believe, 33 engine. So there was, the company suffered losses also. We all suffered that day.
One of the questions I'll ask a combat veteran, and I've talked to many, hundreds of them, but is there fear in combat? And to my surprise, they tell me, now you're scared in general going into war, but when the combat's happening, there's no fear. That's what they've said. It's after the combat, they break down, they may cry, or the fear engulfs them. Is it like that maybe with what you're describing, or was there a fear factor the whole time, or was it just, I'm doing a job, and maybe the fear, and then afterwards, where do you have your, how do you process this in your downtime? So is there fear going into this, or?
Well, in the fire service, we're dealing with, you could die, get seriously injured or die at any time, and men do. So, and it's not for everybody. You know, certain people do certain jobs. I could be a firefighter. I don't think I could be a surgeon. So you have to learn to deal with that. And no, there certainly is a respect for fire. It's part of nature. It's very unpredictable. And there's been many times where I was scared to death, rightfully so, because I thought I was going to die. But you have to overcome that fear. And with experience, you gain more confidence. And you become very proficient at your job. And that was very satisfying. And as firefighters, we are fueled by adrenaline, I think. And we do try to push the envelope. That's what you need in the job. That's what the job takes. And on the day at the Trade Center, though, I have to say, after those buildings collapsed, I reached my fear quotient. I thought I was going to die, and I didn't. And I'm still dealing with that every day. It's a good thing. I'm glad I'm here, and I'm trying to be productive with my life, and I think I am. And I know that I was spared that day for a reason. It wasn't my time. And they didn't get me then, and they're not going to get me now.
So like with the war veterans, John, you did battle some with survivor's guilt, what they call survivor's guilt. Why did they go, they die and not me? You've struggled with that a little bit, or? Not
really. You have to wonder, you know, having experienced it firsthand, I think it was a matter of which way you turned or where you were. I did survive, and I don't feel guilty about it, but I do have, at times it gets the best of me that the people that I love the most, the guys that I work with, are no longer here, and that hurts real bad, because we lost some real good people that day across the board. Many firefighters are real talented people. They very diverse. They do, you would be shocked at the things that they can do. They're good at everything. They're good at everything. And some of them are the best. And that day we lost the best.
So at what point that day or the next day, or did it happen, where you just sat down or laid down and go to sleep, and it just like consumed you what was going on? Or did you allow that to happen? I'm sure that happened at some point, but that de-stressing, whatever debriefing time, I mean.
Well, it did, but it didn't for me. It didn't happen until years later. Immediately after the collapse, we were all hoping we would find some survivors. And 6 truck did come out. They pulled themselves out of the rubble, and that was a beautiful story. And I know a couple of those guys. But it wasn't to be that all those that were lost. So then we knew after a while, the rescue effort was ended and became a recovery effort. And many people spent many hours down there trying to recover the remains. And there was many, many funerals to attend. So the firefighters are a very loyal group. We have tradition. And the funerals were well attended. But that took its toll on me personally too. After attending many, many, many funerals, it overwhelmed me. And so at some time down the road was when it took a while, I would say a good year and a half before it really set in on me. And then, and I've been dealing with it ever since. A lot of issues, but I'm trying to deal with them. There's a lot of help out there. The department's been responsive. A lot of good things have come out of it.
I think you told me when we first communicated that you maybe have never told your story before. You felt like I was the guy. Tell me about that.
Well, I'm a bit of a historian myself, Larry. I like to read history. I like to study it. Second World War, Civil War, are interests of mine. And I try to learn something from that. And that was a historical moment, September 11th. And I'm part of that now. I'm still here. And it's important to me to relate that story because I think young people now should be educated about what occurred and what really happened and why we were attacked because of who we are, because of the way we live, because we're Americans. We were attacked by a sinister force. And I think that young people down the road need to be told the truth about what occurred. And when you hear it firsthand from somebody who was there, there's no better recounting of it. So I feel that what you're doing, your work, and by you being a media to that, allow me to tell my story from my perspective of what occurred that day, what I saw. It is important to me that 50 years from now, that the truth be told.
Perfect. That's exactly right, man. I was going to ask you about the memorial services, but you shared a little bit about that. I know that had to be difficult. How is your life different now, 10 years later?
Well, it's a good question. World Trade Center pretty much ended my career with the fire department. I had 21 years in, and I wasn't ready to go. I wasn't. After experiencing that, I wanted to get away from it, but then no sooner than I was out, then I realized that the bell doesn't ring anymore. And that was a big part of who I was, to respond. But it is a young man's job, and I am getting older. And I think part of aging and living well is to be able to adapt to the changes that life throws at you. So I've made some changes. And a lot of other things don't seem so important anymore, and I focus on trying to be happy and stay positive. And in the world we live, it's very dismaying to me sometimes, the politics and the inhumanity that men have towards each other in the world. I really wish that we could all live in peace. It's a dream, but I hope that one day I'll live to see that dream come true.
I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all the war veterans, so you're in good company here with the question, but tell me about freedom. I mean, 9/11, our country, the military. What does freedom mean to you, John?
Well, freedom is what we all live under here in the United States. We have the ability to pretty much do what we want, say what we want, within the scope of the law, and the law is what separates us from the animals, so they say. But freedom is a concept, and I think the important factor here is that freedom is not free. That in order for us, for everybody to enjoy that freedom, the military, they provide that freedom. There is a cost. People do pay, and they pay with their lives. And we were attacked, I believe, because other people don't like the American way of life. They don't. I don't understand it, what it is, where that hatred comes, and how you can attack innocent people because of the way they live. But I love this country, and I love the freedom that we're provided, and the fact that with hard work, you get an education, you work hard, you will be successful, and you could enjoy it. You could enjoy life any way you want, as opposed to some other place where they're denigrating women, or they don't like you because of your religion, or what have you. So we have a long way to go, I think, in this world.
How about the American flag? What does it mean and represent to you?
I'm very proud of my flag. I like to fly it daily, and I think everybody should be proud. It should be treated with respect. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of our nation, and it should be flown with pride and not with disgrace. It's an honor to fly that flag.
Wow. What did you think about last night coming here today? Were you anxious? Were you, I mean, what were you thinking?
Well, I was excited at the prospect of being able to tell my story in such a respectable manner. And I'm very glad to be here. And I try to limit my stress and not stress myself out too much, because I'm trying to stay healthy, and stress is unhealthy. So I just try to take things as they come and try and stay nice, even keel, and take things in stride, not get too excited about anything. Not easy to do, but that's my goal.
There's just so much that I could probably ask. We've got just, so much time, but I don't want to shut the camera off and have you say, oh, I should have told you this. Is there anything maybe I didn't ask you about this event that you want to tell me? Anything that maybe, I mean, there's so many different things. Do you think there's a part of what happened that you're never going to tell anybody? Just like in combat, I'm sure there's a part of combat they're never going to tell me. But do you think maybe there were things you saw that we're just not going to ever? I'm not talking about.
Well,
blood and guts.
this is actually therapeutic for me to be able to tell this, because I've told it. I haven't shared it with everybody. Certain people I could talk to, certain people I can't talk to. It's a comprehension of understanding where I'm coming from. And my message would be that, that hopefully that we can all learn from this, and that somehow, through some miracle, that we can all live in peace, but also that what occurred that day, that should not be forgotten, and the story should not be changed. Tell the story, why we were attacked, and what happened. And the firefighters and the police officers, and everybody, EMS, there was a tremendous response that came out, and a lot of help that day. But what's important to me is that it is part of history and should be told accordingly. And hopefully the next generation will be educated and will learn something from that and go on to find better solutions than blowing up innocent people.
When you listen to that 911 recording that you played earlier, what do you think about?
It's kind of unreal, the whole experience. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and think, just didn't really happen. But I know it did. And as I stated, I'm glad I'm here. And I'm very happy that I was given the opportunity to do my job with very good men, and that we did our job, and I'm very proud of that.
One kind of wrap-up question. I mean, you're a part of history. I mean, you may not think of it like that, but you are. That's a historic moment. Do you ever think about that? I mean, you were there. This is like when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, at one point that day, that thought went through my head that this is our Pearl Harbor. I did think of that, and I am kind of introspective, and I'm always thinking things out. And I knew it was a historic event, and again, that was part of what brought me here today. That we record that history in the proper context, and that the story is not. They don't spin it. Tell it the way it is, and firefighters are pretty good at that. They're pretty down to earth. So if you get it from a firefighter, stories do get embellished a little bit over time. But my line is, it's based on a true story.
Well, the camera's still rolling. How do I get a Fire Department New York t-shirt? Can I buy one?
That's easy. We'll hook you up. We'll fix you
You're
up.
not going to give me that helmet. I'm going to stop the camera, but don't move. I'm going to take a couple of pictures of me and you, and I do this with all the veterans, so you're in good company here. And then Nancy's going to take a couple of pictures, and then we'll get Steve or Owen up here. So, but just stay there for a second. Thank you. Thank you, sir.